Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. So obviously with pre-patch coming out, there's a lot of changes to a lot of different classes, and a lot is kind of happening all at one time. Alright, so what I want to kind of do with some of these videos coming up is I want to go over some of the changes. I'm going to specifically focus on tanks. I'm currently trying to get some other people on to maybe talk about DPS specs and like what changed for their spec, what stayed the same, does it feel better, does it feel worse, that kind of thing. And just really go from there to see what's going on. But hey, let's go ahead and start it off with Prot Warrior. All right, so obviously Prot Warrior has been my main for all of season 3. It has been the tank that I put in the most time, most effort, and the most work on. So I want to talk about the changes that we're kind of seeing. All right. Also, before you guys come at me in the comments, I'm still working on the UI thing, so like it'll get better, I hope. All right, but anyways, so first thing we'll talk about is going to be stats. All right, so obviously we got this item level squish, and we will be getting a stat squish going into midnight like we do with every new expansion. All right, but overall for Prot Warrior, our stats are pretty much going to stay the same. We're still going to be looking at haste, crit, haste, verse. Those are going to be the primary thing, but we also don't want to ignore our mastery. And then obviously, as far as secondary stats, just whatever you end up with, you end up with. I have not focused on them too entirely, and I was able to get up into 15s and 16s pretty easily. So again, don't feed too much into your tertiary stats. As far as your primary stats, obviously strength, stamina, armor, that's what we're chasing after. And then after that, we want haste, crit, and verse as our primary stats. All right. Yeah, so that's stats. Enchantments, definitely probably stick with what we were running. There's really not a reason to change out the enchantments or your gems. Whatever you've been running with all season, that should be more than enough. I don't see any reason why we'd be changing that. We didn't have a massive stat overhaul. I don't really think that anything changed for our stats. So, that works. All right. So next up, let's talk about talents. All right. So obviously we are seeing a massive change to our talent tree. All right. It's not as drastic as some of the other classes have got or other specs have got, excuse me. But there are some pretty big changes. All right. So obviously these are the talents that I have chosen to run with. As far as our spec tree goes, there's only a handful of like pretty important talents that we're going to try and take. First up, obviously, if you're going to run Mountain Thane, then you want to be running Thunderclap. You want to run Stormbolt, Spell Reflection, and Shockwave. All right. So those two talents with Stormbolt and Shockwave, that's going to give us our biggest utility. Thunderclap is our primary source of damage and really how Mountain Thane works. And Spell Reflection is going to give us a little bit of extra magic damage to get through any tough pulls or tough magic damage that we're going to be facing that we've already been dealing with. All right. Um, you want to take your heroic leap because that is mobility. All right. Mobility is a very big deal for warriors, especially given the fact that they're not a very quick moving tank, and we're not really taking a talent to increase our movement speed. There's not much point. So having that extra movement ability is just that much better for us. So all of that's pretty much staying the same. One of the big differences is Rend is now in the class tree as opposed to being over here in the spec tree. All right, it doesn't really change what it does. It doesn't really change how you apply it. None of that. It's still going to be applied with your Thunderclap. You still want to get it on every target. It's still going to generate threat for you. It's going to create damage. It's going to be a good big thing for you. All right. Beyond that, most of the rest of our talents, there's a lot of really good talents. A lot of them can be used in different situations. In the grand scheme of things, what I kind of did with it was I took utility talents and I took things that were going to benefit me and that were also going to give me maximum access to my capstones. All right. This is one of our new talents. All right, Battlefield Commander. All right, this affects our shouts, our piercing howl, which also with the talent gets turned into disrupting shout. All right, and this just kind of benefits us. It gives us a little bit more than what we were bringing before. It's not enough to really write home about our call. It does give us a little bit more group utility and does help us out a little bit more. It also gives a good reason to run rallying cry, and it gives us a good reason to keep up with our battle shout, even if it's just for us. Even if we were running in a magic group that they're not really benefiting from that attack power, that's going to benefit you and that's going to be good for you. All right. Next up is the stance mastery. All right. So this is, I would say this is more of a raid talent. All right. But what you can do is you can kind of interchange this with your champion spear. I think either one of these are a good option. If you are the person in Mythic Plus who's able to bounce between battle stance and defensive stance, okay, then obviously this talent is better for you. I personally do not do that. I tend to stay in defensive stance all the way through my Mythic Plus runs. It's just a personal preference. It's the way that I like to do things. So it works. You know, it does work out for me, but it's not as beneficial. And you know, some dungeons I'll be running stance mastery. Some dungeons I'll be running champion spear. It just kind of depends on the dungeon, depends on the situation. All right. And then our last new one, we get anger management. It's not really a new talent. It's kind of a rework talent that got moved over for us. All right. But basically, every 20 rage reduces the remaining cooldown of Avatar and Shield Wall. All right, so this definitely helps us out because, you know, Avatar and Shield Wall being our bigger cooldowns, you want to have as much uptime on those as you can. And given how much rage that we're pouring into our Revenge and Ignore Pain, as well as running Shield Block. All right, so that's gonna rack it up. All right, because it's every 20 rage. You're spending 30 rage per Shield Block, so that's, you know, you're getting a second and a half, and then Ignore Pain is 35 rage. That's another second and a half. Revenge is 20 rage, so that's a second. So between your shield block uptime, your Ignore Pain uptime, and your Revenge uptime, you're definitely benefiting more from this talent than most other talents that you're going to take. All right. The last talent that I want to talk about is going to be Berserker Shout. So originally in the build that we were running for all of season 3, this was not a talent that we took. All right. One of the reasons why we take this is because it is a pathing talent. All right. It's actually a very good talent to have, and it gives you a little bit more utility. All right. So if you know that there's a fear or something coming in, we can use this and, you know, help out the group, help out yourself, help out your healer. It helps that you are a little bit safer, right? And then that opens up talents into stat bonuses, and we get our double time for our charge, which gives us more mobility. Moving down, you know, effects of our shouts, they last a little bit longer now. All right, revenge, dealing more damage. Like, all of these things are very, very important to have, and this having access to this talent does definitely help us out a lot. All right, now there are a couple of other optional talents that I chose not to take in my personal build for plenty of different reasons. All right, one of them is our wrecking throw. All right, this can be very, very good, and it can help, especially like on pull. Um, the uh, the Titan guys in Ecodome. This would be a good talent to take for them, something you can swap into. We have Thunderclap giving us a little bit better crowd control, so you can chain a little easier and you have time to get aggro on the new guys so you can get back to the old group, however it works out. You know, we've got a healing increase. All right, so there are a lot of different options for talents, and our class tree is so much more open than what it used to be and what it was uh, throughout most of season 3. All right. Moving into our hero tree, not a whole lot is really going to change. We're not really going down this row, because this is more utility row. This is going to give us better damage and resource roll. So that this is more of like a what's going to make me better type of thing. All right, and then moving into our class tree. All right, so there's a couple of things to note with the class tree. All right, one of the biggest things that you have to understand is what is your skill level as a prot warrior, because that's what's going to determine how you want to path down your spec tree. All right, because we have multiple talents that will play into our defensives. We have multiple talents that will play into our aggressiveness. We have some that are better at low health, some that are better at high health. Like, how do you want to play, and what is your struggle point with a prot warrior? All right, I kind of went and balanced a little bit. I feel like my spec tree is balanced between survival and damage. All right. There's really not a whole lot that changed. Um, from our spec tree. Things got rearranged, but one of the biggest things that changed is Last Stand. All right, so Last Stand used to be very strong defensive ability that you would use in like oh shit moments, right? Now it has kind of been changed into a cheat death for Prot Warrior. All right, so it's going to activate our shield wall. It's going to increase our maximum health, and it's going to heal us for that 30% increase on our health. Right, so this in and of itself, it becomes a very strong talent, and I think it becomes a talent that you're going to take really no matter what the situation is. All right. The other thing that we see changed is Avatar is now towards the bottom of our spec tree. All right. So Avatar, like I said earlier, it is one of our strongest defensives. It is a talent that we're going to take. So you have to put in the nodes to get here. All right. We do get some really good talents over here. Shield slam damage increase, revenge procs, defensive stance increase. All right. But like none of these talents here are good enough to where you're going to want to take them. All right. So again, I'm not. I've said this about Warrior before. I don't really like the way they set up our trees. I don't really like the pathing we have to take down our trees. So I kind of wish that they would fix it, and I wish that the pathing would just be a little bit more open as opposed to very straightforward. All right. Another change that we are seeing, violent outbursts. All right, so it used to be that every 250 rage you would spend would trigger your violent outburst and it would cause your shield slam or your thunderclap to deal 200% increased damage, generate 50% more rage, and grant ignore pain. Well, the problem with that was in every situation, Thunderclap was not the option to press for Violent Outburst. So you had to get a weak aura and you had to track where your rage was at, and you had to sit there and you had to calculate it up, and you had to make sure that every Violent Outburst went into Shield Slam, and you had to make sure it was timed perfectly. Otherwise, you're sitting on a proc of Thunderclap in favor of trying to get shield slam. And if your shield slam didn't proc, you had to wait and you had to try and proc your shield slam. And it was just there was so much work that went into it. And now it's just going into your shield slam and it's just benefiting your shield slam. All right. So up here we see that Devastate, Thunderclap, and Revenge and Execute have a chance to reset their remaining cooldown. This did change. It used to reset the cooldown and give a damage increase if I remember correctly, or that came from another talent. I'm not 100%. Yeah, yeah. I think it was strategy. It also gave us like a damage increase. All right, but we're not really seeing that, and we're seeing that pretty much every bit of Shield Slam is going to be from just casting Shield Slam, and if it your proc is just you resetting the cooldown, which makes our Violent Outburst that much easier to play around. You don't really have to think about it. This is almost a 100% forget it ever happened and just use your shield slam. Obviously, we're going to be tracking our ignore pain, and you do want to kind of keep an eye on things so that you don't overcap on your ignore pain. You don't want to overcap on rage. So there are normal factors to consider, but the fact that I only have to think about two things with violent outburst as opposed to half a dozen things, that is a game changer in and of itself. All right. Obviously, we're still going to be running all three of our capstone talents. Whirling Blades is still better than Ravager just because Ravager does require you to actually target where you want it to go. It's just better get those passive procs because like I've had multiple situations where I had like two or three of my Whirling Blades going off, whereas when I was running Ravager, I could only get one out every minute and a half. Is kind of annoying. All right. Battle Scarred Veteran. All right, we're still taking this. This is still a very good talent for us. Gives us a little bit extra survivability. And then Shield Charge. All right. Shield Charge is still going to be the thing to take just because of the damage and the CC capabilities that it gives us. All right. So that's pretty much it with talents. Again, a lot changed, but I think it was a lot of good for the change. A lot of good things changed, and I think that at the end of the day, the only complaint I have left is see how our class it's so open, it's so free, right? So why can our spec tree not be the same way? All right. There are plenty of ways that they could open up this spec tree. There are plenty of ways that they could make things more consistent, easier to get. And I think that it would be very, very, very nice if they would just come back in and open it up a little bit more. I mean, you've got so many gaps in this tree where nothing connects in, and you're forced to go a certain way. And I don't like that. I don't like how that's set up, and I wish that they would do something about that. All right. So next up, let's talk about our spells that have changed. All right. So one of the things that we're seeing is Slam is no longer an ability that we have. We've lost a lot of other abilities that you didn't even put them on your action bars just because they weren't good enough to use, right? With that being said, one of the biggest losses is we lost Thunderous Roar. I absolutely hate this change. I think that is one of the worst things. That was an amazing AoE ability. That was an amazing threat gainer. That was extra damage. It did so much good for us, and it's gone. I'm really not a huge fan of how they did that, and I really wish that um that change would get reverted, right? But they're not going to bring it back. It is what it is. I'm just going to be salty about it, right? So one of the primary changes is Whirlwind is actually going to have use for us now. All right, it's 20 rage. It's going to deal pretty good damage. All right, and it's a good low target ability. All right, if you need to burn some rage, right? Obviously, Rallying Cry is in a convenient spot in our talent tree over here. Very convenient to take. Opens us some stuff up for us. It is a very good spell. Big group benefits. You get the benefit from your battlefield commander. A lot of good things. All right. Now, in general, there's not a whole lot that has changed for us rotationally. All right. Um, I'll use the 3 target and I'll get into AoE, and then I'll get into what our single target looks like after that. All right. So, one of the big things that we're going to be changing is you're going to use your heroic leap to get into pretty much every pull, and you're going to charge into every mob you're really trying to chain into. You're either charging or you're taunting depending on location and situation. All right. Um, so with that being said, on pull, you want to leap in. All right. So you're going to leap in. First thing you're going to do automatically, very first global thunderclap. And again, before I do get too much more detailed, this is specifically for Mountain Thane. All right. This is not for Colossus. I haven't really looked too much into Colossus, mostly because the way that Colossus plays has always felt clunky to me, and I'm not a huge enjoyer of it. I might try it out in Midnight and see what I think of it, just kind of see which one feels better. But as it stands right now, I am definitely just going to be sticking with Mountain Thane, and for this guide, I'm going to talk about Mountain Thane only. All right. So, with that being said, you can precast defensives, but I'm not going to get into precasting because this is really not a video for high-end players. This is more for casuals. Pretty much anybody running, I would say probably 15s and below. You don't really need to worry about precasting. It's not that deep. Wait until you're running higher keys. If you start getting one shot, then you know you need to get into precasting. Leave me a comment below and I can give you a quick rundown on how we're going to precast. All right, it's super simple. All right, so heroic leap in, thunderclap. As soon as your thunderclap is down, your primary target, you can shield slam or you can go into a defensive rotation. Now, what does a defensive rotation look like? Well, on pull, shield wall immediately. Once you have your rage, shield block to go ahead and keep 100% uptime of shield block. Then finish your gather, finish getting threat. Once everything is grouped up and everything has been gathered, all right, then we're going to go into Avatar, Demoralizing Shout, and we're going to spam all of our rage directly into Ignore Pain to get as many stacks of that as we can while also maintaining the uptime on our shield block. Now, the only way that we really generate rage anymore is going to be Demoralizing Shout, Shield Slam, and Thunderclap. That's it. All right. So in real time, this is kind of what our rotation is going to look like. I'm jumping in, Shield Slam, defensive, right? I just said all the wrong names, right? So Thunderclap, straight into our Shield Slam, everything's gathered up. All right, cool. Now I've got my shield block is going. Now, pretty much I'm just hitting 2 buttons and I am building all of my rage, and then I'm going to spam everything into Ignore Pain. Well, now I'm at 100 stacks of Ignore Pain, so I go right back into using shield block. All right, I'm generating my rage, my ignore pain, refresh it, refresh my shield block straight into it. All right, now I have all this extra rage. All right, cool. Revenge, right? Oh, well, things are a little bit more spread out than what I want them to be. So you can spam it on whirlwind, right? If targets are not going to get hit by your they're not going to get hit by your revenge, then obviously you can use whirlwind as an alternative, and it is not that big of a damage loss. It's not that big of a deal to do that. All right. So that's pretty much what your rotation would look like as far as AoE for single target. All right. So let me run over here. All right, so it's going to kind of be the same thing. So on single target, let's say, we're going to charge in. All right, so we charge in. All right, you want to keep shield charge on cooldown, okay? And you want to keep shield slam and thunderclap on cooldown. Now, the bigger changes that come with single target is our defensive capability, right? So we're going to focus more on shield wall, shield block than we are ignore pain. All right, ignore pain is primarily going to be something that we look at for multiple targets, lots of AoE coming in. But if it's single target, you can keep about half your stacks of ignore pain and then put the rest of your rage into your attacks. All right. We also want to make sure that we have 40 rage up for execute every time we proc or execute. I'm not going to switch my talents around just for simplicity, but keep in mind, don't use your execute and single target unless you have 40 rage to burn. All right. So our rotation is going to look kind of like this. You're going to charge in, shield slam, straight into our defensives, straight into our attacks. All right. I'm going to put a little bit, I pull up a charge of it. I might ignore pain, put another charge on. All right. That's all I really care about, right? Now I'm just keeping up with my shields. All right. And if you mess up your shield block rotation, like that's fine. Throw a shield wall up instead to cover that downtime, and you'll be fine. Refresh my ignore pain, doing damage, right? I'm burning excess rage, going, right? My shield block is staying up 100% of the time. Ignore pain, keeping that at 100%, or keeping that up, because you're gonna proc ignore pain in single target the same way you will in AoE. You're just not gonna burn ignore pain as much, right? So that's really everything that we're looking at with our Prot Warrior. Again, a lot of the changes, really good changes. There's not a whole lot different with Prot Warrior. If anything, I think Prot Warrior has gotten much simpler. It's not as high speed of a tank, and it's not as fast moving as some of the iterations that we've seen in the past. I like it. I have definitely decided that this is going to end up being my main during the War Within. This is the tank I want to push keys with, and this is what I really think is going to be the best option for just an all around fun, simple tank to play that doesn't require too much, but is not so brain dead easy, right? Appreciate all you guys watching this. If you like the video, like, subscribe, and leave me a comment on what y'all thought. Have a good one.